see what we got. Okay.
Well, joining us now is Ben Crump to talk about what they've found so far and what they are hoping to find from the authorities down in Mississippi. Ben, welcome back to TMZ Live.
Hey, thank you, Charles, for having me. Thank you for covering this matter.
Yeah, we have been all over this story, and I know everybody wants answers, and we are doing our best to try and see what we can find. But with this autopsy, the independent autopsy that you did, you mentioned that obviously, I think the part that people are really focusing on is that you mentioned that there was this coloration, this red coloration on the back of Nolan's head. Um, did the examiner who looked at him have any inkling about what that might be? Could it be blunt force trauma? And I understand that the cause of death and manner is undetermined, but is it possible that it was blunt force trauma?
Well, he wants to be able to give his theories and opinions before the grand jury in Mississippi as to the possible causes of the red discoloration in the back of Nolan Wells' head near the occipital region of the brain. And so it's very significant. He concluded that it was undetermined pending further investigation, the manner and cause of death. But he did find that very significant that you had this red discoloration in the back of his brain in the occipital region of the brain, of the head. Also, he found it very significant. He said that they did not send his.
Notice he's being careful not to say suspicious. He's saying significant, but and that's just being careful. But I would say suspicious, but he's doing a good job of saying it's significant, and it's a bit out of place, and there's still questions to be answered. There's more that was missing with the autopsy that the second autopsy didn't get or haven't gotten yet from the Mississippi autopsy. But let him continue.
With his body in the second autopsy, he said when he was the chief medical examiner of D.C., this is something that's common. He said normally he would do it when they were investigating and studying whether there were fractures to the neck or some kind of, compressions to his vertebrae.
Right.
So that is significant, he found. And the most significant thing he said, what is the crux of the matter that we do not know, and that is what was the condition of Nolan Wells' body when he entered the water? Was he conscious?
Exactly.
Or was he unconscious? Was he forced into the water or was he unforced into the water? He said those are going to be very significant in a potential drowning death case where you had a person who was able to swim.
Ben, was your examiner
and what they're gonna look at also is if he had drowned, then they're gonna look for water in his lungs, because if he was alive when he hit the water, he would have water present in his lungs, right? Now, that being said, we're missing, parts of his throat, and we can't tell if it's asphyxiation and all that because of how they did the autopsy. They're still studying things in Mississippi that's kind of suspicious. It's odd that 2 weeks later they can't determine whether water was in his lungs when he after he hit the water or before, or if he was already dead pretty much by the time he hit the water, which would tell a different story.
I know you said that just like the throat was removed, what about the lungs? You mentioned that that the initial autopsy, that the lungs had been dissected, but was your examiner able to see the lungs at all, or were they also removed?
No, they were able to see the lungs. However, Charles, remember the state medical examiner for Mississippi got to observe the body when it was first recovered. And that Dr. Roger Mitchell, the independent pathologist that we hired, he would not have seen the body until 6 days later. And the body had, as he said,
which is
decomposed. And it is one of those things that he is going to have to rely on photographs that were taken by the Mississippi medical examiner.
So still, they have to have a certain level of trust with the Mississippi officials doing this, because there's a 6-day period in between the autopsy that they did when they pulled Nolan Wells' body out of the water and the autopsy that they was able to get independently from DC. So, Ben Crump is being very professional. I got to give it up to him, because he's still raising the eyebrows that there's some suspicious at least cover up going on that we staying on top of. But he's also pointing out that here's some things that you have to watch the hands dealing from the deck on this type of situation. They have a lot of questions within that 6-day time period between the autopsies, what body parts was missing, and if they still testing, and if they were still testing certain body parts in Mississippi, why didn't they disclose that?
Would believe that they would have taken photographs and their observations, whether there was water in the lungs and water in his airways. We know that some from the United Cajun Navy said that his body didn't seem bloated when they found him, that they didn't see his body as waterlogged. So all these things are significant as we try to figure out why Nolan Wells is dead.
Yeah, Ben,
right.
How were Nolan's parents, how did they receive, when I'm sure before the news conference this morning, you had gone over the autopsy results, the independent autopsy results with them. How were they when they got those results? Was it disappointing to them? Were they, obviously they want to know what happened to their son. Were they disappointed that, because of all those conditions you just mentioned, the examiner was not able to determine a manner or cause of death?
Well, Charles, they were alarmed, as many of us were, at the, red discoloration in the back of his head. They were alarmed that he didn't have his throat with the body. And, they want
That's
answers.
key.
They have been very consistent. They do not...
Now, it could very well be that Mississippi is still examining the throat area, right? But if they want to determine that he drowned, key pieces of his body, like throat and lungs, we would need information on. We would need to know what's, like I said, was his airways filled with water that would indicate a drowning, right? The Navy people that found him, they initially, stated that it didn't look like he had bloated from drowning. So that would indicate he was dead when he hit the water. So then if he perhaps was passed away when he hit the water, then that throat evidence is, that throat result is key, because it's going to tell us if he died of a choking, asphyxiation, some sort of, there was already evidence that there was some fighting going on, some drinking, some boating without underage boating and underage drinking. So, who knows what type of fight that they got into, right? That would lead to a situation where he would end up dead before hitting that water. And at the very least, that's your buddy, you know what I mean? And you leave the island on the boat, leave him alone after y'all been drinking, with strangers on Horn Island, which, I got to look and see how many miles it is from the shore of Mississippi, but it's out there. You can't swim it back to the shore, right? So if that's your buddy, you just left him, you just like, fuck him, just left him at the island. So at least there's negligence if there wasn't foul play.
Seth, that nobody didn't know anything, that nobody didn't see anything. And so when you think about the fact that Reverend Al and Mr. Tyler Perry and Mr. Terrell Owens has put up this $125,000 reward, that is because we know somebody saw something. Somebody knows something. There were over 300, 400 people out there on Horn Island that day. We, on our Nolan Wells tip line, we've received over hundreds of calls with video, people saying what they saw, people having photographs, and it's important that the people who knew something, who saw something, that they call us. Is critically important.
To that point, Ben, I don't know if you've seen, there's a video that we were able to obtain, and we posted this yesterday. And I don't know if you have seen it yet, but the person who shot it pointed this out, gave a copy of this to the police because they believe that it could be Nolan. There's an image of a young man who's bent over on the back deck of a boat. And the trunks certainly look like the same color that Nolan was wearing on July 4th. And, you know, all we can see, he never stands up, so we can't see his face. But they thought this could be Nolan. And I'm wondering if the family has seen this, or if you're at any contact with any of Nolan's friends who might have seen this, who could say, yeah, that's him. Because the police are trying to determine that. We don't know if they've figured out if it's him. Have you seen this video?
Well, my team of investigators and our team of lawyers have received that video and received many others. And we received witnesses saying that they say it's Nolan, but until we can confirm these allegations, we want to be careful to say that witnesses have said that this is Nolan. And we also have videos where you have people having exchanges, disputes, and people have said that was Nolan. So we're trying to dot every I and cross every T because it's so critically important that this family gets answers, that the country gets answers.
You said that your investigators have been getting a lot of tips about videos and photos, and I'm wondering if there's anybody coming forward, because you said something that is so true, where there's so many people who are out there in Horn Island. Whatever it is that happened to Nolan, even if it is accidental, but whatever it is that happened,
nobody saw shit.
Implausible that no one has seen anything. I'm wondering if you are having any luck hearing from people who are actually on the island who saw him. I mean, obviously, even in the image that we have, that they may or may not be him, but there are so many people there. It just seems implausible that whatever happened to this young man, someone didn't see anything. Are you hearing from people who are on the island?
We are hearing from people on the island, and the Nolan Wells tip line at bencrump.com is getting a lot of hits and submissions. And that 800 number that we want to encourage everybody to call at the Ben Crump Call Center is 1-888-991-1772.
Okay.
And we are going to take detailed information from you.
Okay. What have you heard from, your independent autopsy is complete now. Have you heard anything from the sheriff's department as to when their results are going to be available? Because obviously they have the throat. They, were able to look at his lungs, and as well, they're going to have the toxicology, which that's going to be the really telling thing here. Have you heard from them when those results might be available?
No, we haven't. And remember, our autopsy is not complete. It's undetermined pending further investigations. That's very important to note, Charles, because we need to examine the throat.
Still pending
we
investigation
also want to see the pictures. We want to know whether his lungs and airways have water in them. Those things are significant if we're trying to be transparent. And they told us they're going to be transparent. So we're going to see if we can take them at their word. Furthermore, I think it's vitally important that we continue to underscore that toxicology is important, but it's not the end all. Charles, if he went into the water with all those people on Horn Island, somebody knows something. Somebody
Damn
saw
right.
something. And that is the crux of the matter. That is what's going to be an issue. You know, the cell phones, all toxic, all play a part. But what did people see? Somebody knows what happened to Nolan Wells.
All right. Ben,
Exactly.
thank you so much.
Yeah, and I want to commend Ben Crump. He's been on some high profile cases. I believe he was on the Ahmaud Arbery case. He's a sharp lawyer. And recently, when he was reading the autopsy report, there's been comments about, his southern dialect. I don't know if he's from Mississippi. I don't think he's from Mississippi himself, but he's from Georgia or Louisiana, Alabama, something like that. But I've learned, don't think just because, just like my grandma used to tell me, just because somebody mispronounced words or they got a thick, dialect, don't underestimate how sharp they are. This brother has won major cases. He's spoken out. He's a bold um, attorney, and I think he's the right brother on the case. So, whether he mispronounced some words at the autopsy or whatever, you got people nitpicking about that, is irrelevant. We focus on, is he the right guy to persist and get justice for the parents of Nolan Wells? And I think he is. You know what I'm saying? I kind of like, he got a little down south twang to him. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, don't underestimate. Like I'm studying that. Don't underestimate somebody's sharpness just because you think they have a dialect or a slang dialect or southern thick accent. You could be making a grave mistake. You know what I'm saying? And we're gonna jump into Judge Mathis's. I might be a few days late on this, but I'm still gonna jump into Judge Mathis's breakdown on how he feel about the case development.
Judge Mathis, happy to have you back, my man.
Thanks for having me back.
Yes, indeed. Had to bring you back on, man. There's so much going on with this Nolan Wells case. I'm still catching up with the details. So, I wanted to bring you back on and get your take on it. For the people that may not be familiar with the case, can you break it down?
Yeah, certainly. Nolan, a black man, went on a boat ride to a pretty much resort island, not necessarily, just a fun island off the coast of Mississippi. And 4 of them left and went and had fun, and only 3 returned. They then found Nolan dead. His 3 friends that he had come with in the boat had gone and left in the boat and claimed that Nolan stayed behind by himself. And additionally, however, and this is where the first question comes in with me, they say he left his cell phone. They have his cell phone.
They had his cell
They
phone.
had it in their possession. Okay, so if your buddy says to you, I'm leaving, you all go back. I'm staying by myself.
He gonna take his
No
phone.
freaks, just me.
So they
wandering
ditched him
around.
at least.
And then you see that he had left his cell phone. So you say, in the boat. And instead of taking it back to a friend who's on the island by himself, and by the way, did you ask him how he was getting home? So instead of...
Outside of the, we went deep into it because it's Mississippi and the racial aspect, and that's definitely, you got to watch. First of all, you got to watch the friends you with, and I would say that there's a racial component to watching the friends you with. Some people may disagree, but yeah, obviously, even if they was all white or all black, there's some hella friends who gonna leave you out on a island. There's quite a bit of miles in between the shoreline of Biloxi and Horn Island and all of that. Y'all went out together in the boat, right? You've been drinking high drugs, that's been reported. I was partying. It was 4th of July. You know what I'm saying? And so all of a sudden, he's just gonna stay by himself on an island that's kind of basically desert. I mean, it's just beach on it. It's not a, I'm gonna do some research on Horn Island, but it's not a place that you just go. If you ain't gonna be, if they're not gonna be a festival or something out there, you just ain't gonna be left out there with no phone. Your phone, he's gonna stay with a girl and just leave his phone. Right? So there's some hella with friends like that. You don't need no fucking enemies. Right? Be careful who you call your friends. Just because somebody's your Facebook friend, just because somebody is your in your class at school on the football team with you, be careful who you call your friends, right? This is, something that young people need to learn. Just kind of hanging out with people that have either, they was beefing over something early in the day. So just kind of hanging out with people that halfway don't fuck with you. You know what I'm saying? You end up in situations where either you left somewhere stranded, you went out with some buddies, now they just say fuck them and they just leave them stranded, right? When they got communication with emergency services and claimed that they boat was taking on water, they didn't say, hey, I got a buddy of mine that was left back on the shore. None of that shit. One of my buddies fell over, nothing. Everybody's fine. This is supposed to be your buddy with no concern of, how they getting back to the island. He doesn't have his own boat. He can't swim. It's not close enough to swim from Horn Island to the shore of Mississippi. Say, bro, if you're going to stay, who you going to stay with? Do you know somebody else that can go get you back? Here's your phone so you can call your parents or something or call the police or something in case you need to get back. None of that shit. They brought his phone. The reason why they got back to shore with his phone and his key, because they didn't realize it was on the boat till they got back. They basically said, bump it, fuck them, right? So be careful who you call your friends because, this is a fatal lesson for him, but it should be a lesson for other people watching. Be careful who you party with and drink with and call your friends, especially party with and drink with. I don't like I stopped going to parties when I was young, and drinking to where I couldn't register what's going on. I did that when I was young though. I'd go drink, party, be so drunk, right? But I'd be with friends who would have my back. And a few times I went out and I would just go into a new place or a new club and I really didn't have my partners with me. Didn't know how I got home and stuff like that. And, could have ended up in a bad way. Being around strangers, not having my, full capacity of what's going on. So drinking too much and being around strangers or being around so-called friends, but they may not fuck with you. They may be jealous of you, right? They may really not like black people, but they might know how to play friendly. You know what I'm saying? And then all of a sudden it's like, man, fuck him. Leave him on the island. We're leaving, right? So at best, pardon me, if it wasn't foul play, which I suspect because of the missing body parts from the Mississippi Autopsy and the cover up of the phone, I suspect foul play, and we're yet to see that. But if it wasn't foul play, it was at least brazen negligence of ensuring that everybody that came on your boat got back safe. Let me let him go.
Going back, you couldn't be that far off because the phone right in the boat. Say an hour or two. If you're a real friend, you'll drive back on that recreational hour or two on the boat having fun to give your man his phone. Because if he's out there by himself, no question about it, 90% white in the state of Mississippi that has a history of demonizing and black men and killing them in the civil rights era. Most of the civil rights killings occurred in Mississippi, including Medgar Evers, including our dear young brother from Mississippi who was killed, and several others. And so we know that Mississippi has a history of demonizing and marginalizing black men. And so the question became, what is the investigation going to be? Well, the police immediately accepted the version of the 3 young men that returned. Now, here you are, you're supposed to be the police. And I just deduced it, and I deduced it not just now, but I had deduced it immediately after seeing it in the media. And I'm not an investigator, I'm a lawyer and a judge, but an investigator, that is a police investigator / detective, has investigative techniques that would have immediately thrown into question what occurred. And common sense throws into question what occurred. And that's where we're at now. And there's some actions being taken by Ben Crump. I've spoken with him, and he's on top of it. And the family has the questions raised. Again, why would he leave his cell phone? Because it had to be voluntary. And then voluntarily stay on an island by himself without telling them why. A lot of questions there, a lot of holes in it, and that's what that grand jury is going to look into. That's the good news.
Yeah, that definitely.
Well, if I would trust the
Why would he
grand
give his
jury
phone
anyway.
to his friend? And I heard that his mom, she had to find out by using an app that his friend had his phone after it was reported.
Track it down.
Very suspicious, correct. And then there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of unanswered questions. There's allegedly an altercation that took place, and I think they say there may be some footage of it. Some have been AI generated, various things, so we don't really know what's true or not. But I think they have eyewitnesses, and that's where the investigation should go. Were there eyewitnesses that saw any type of altercation? Is there video? There's cameras everywhere. You can't do anything without being caught on camera.
Everybody's got their own cameras on people's boats, aerial cameras, so you can't go nowhere without somebody catching something on camera.
And so to that extent, there's some footage out there that shows this altercation, if indeed it occurred. And so the grand jury, they are impaneled when there's a reasonable suspicion that something may have occurred. So that's good news. There's a reasonable suspicion that a crime has been committed. When you go to the grand jury,
so far, so good.
The prosecutor presents all the evidence that they have to explain to the grand jury the case they're looking into, and 90% of the time, or over 90% of the time, the prosecutor comes back with an indictment because grand juries only hear one side. So they're only going to hear the side of the prosecutor. So the question becomes, is the prosecutor going to do a thorough investigation and presentation to the grand jury? Because if they miss some parts of the evidence that is necessary, then the grand jury has nothing to consider. But if, as it has been in most cases, it goes where the grand jury charge has been made, it's going to go to an indictment. And then all evidence will be seen on all sides. What I don't like about grand juries is if the defense don't get a chance to present their case to the grand jury. It's only the prosecutor. Prosecutor says, we have this, that, and the other evidence, begins talking, brings people in to interview them during the grand jury process, and then they determine whether there's probable cause to believe that a crime was committed. Probable cause means more likely than not. Reasonable suspicion means there may have been a crime, and so we have to look into it. Probable cause means we believe there was a crime, more likely than not. So that's where we're at with it.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but Nolan's mom, she said that his phone was scrubbed, right?
Yes. The mother said that some of the things on his phone had been removed. And
which is extremely suspicious. On the 4th of July weekend, the young man took no pictures of the friend. They got the picture of him and the 3 friends on the boat that was taken by another friend of theirs, but he didn't take any pictures on his phone of the 4th of July weekend, horn out, nothing like that. 24 hours missing from his phone that they had in their person. I mean, walk like a duck and talk like a duck is a duck. Quack like a duck, whatever the saying is.
Of that, but she's not saying anything.
Fool me, you can't get fooled again.
The truth in this case. And so everything she says, I'm going to take her at her word. She has no reason to trump up anything. She wants to get to the bottom of this and who killed her son. I don't believe he drowned. I believe he was killed. But I'm a judge that has to weigh all the evidence. Preliminarily, that's what I see. You don't leave your friend on an island, seeing that he has left his phone, and not at least go back. You came there with him. You left him there, you say, because he wanted to stay. But you notice that he's left his phone. How was he going to get home in the first place? Wouldn't he need his phone in order to call his transportation?
Yeah, I'm gonna end it right there. I'm gonna wrap it up right there. But yeah, you know, Judge Mathis has a way of wrapping it up. In a nutshell, you know, couldn't be any clearer than that. I also suspect foul play. At least if it wasn't foul play, it was definitely negligence. Definitely no kind of friends are they to have left them stranded with no phone and things like that, no way to get back. So, you know, a whole lot of explaining to do that hadn't been done. And also, like I said, the phone being scrubbed of pictures, and all of their phones and social media is being scrubbed, and his phone and keys being on their person. All of that smell like a rat. The medical examiner not disclosing that they're still investigating the throat area so far stinks. The sheriff coming out immediately saying that they don't suspect foul play without at least some comments, without at least staying neutral and saying, we don't know yet if it was foul play. He came out immediately. There wasn't no foul play. Nothing to see here. No smoke here. So yeah, we're going to stay on top of this, man. I'm going to go on and wrap this up. If you got comments and things you want to say and add to the discussion, put them in the comments, and I'm out.